Welcome to Memorable Marketing by MediaGroup. On today's episode, we have Niki Harrold. Niki has a wealth of experience in a variety of industries, mostly doing online, social, looking at data, and now she's a marketing director as well. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. I hope you do too.
People don't buy a 2,000-3,000 euro bicycle from a social media advertisement. We as marketers, we can come up with a lot of solutions to perceived problems. But the most important part is to actually ask your customers.
Were there challenges in working with a lot of different cultures? I know you're sort of an international woman of mystery with living in different countries, but perhaps you can talk about some differences in cultures and so on.
I don't think we have enough time to talk about all the differences in cultures, but I think number one is respect. Have respect for the other side with whom you are having a conversation with. If it is a culture very similar to yours, I think it's maybe an easier adjustment to kind of hear each other and see each other's needs and goals. The more distant cultures, the more open-minded you are, the more likely it is that they will give to you the information and insight that you need to be successful with them. And there we go. I remember the sixth country. It was India. And I apologize for that one was the one that lacked my attention clearly. Giving you a great example with Echo. So the Center of Excellence that I sat in, our core markets were America, Canada, Australia, Japan, Singapore, India. Tell me how much overlap there is, right, across all these six, right? I have personal experience in Canada, in America, obviously with the European markets here, I've got personal experience. I have very, very little exposure to the Australian market, Japanese, the Singaporean market, or the Indian market at the time. But every single one of the champions from those markets, they gave you the time of the day to kind of onboard you onto their own cultural needs, right? And more importantly, when you suggested, hey, let's test it, right? Like, it's not that I don't believe you, because why wouldn't I believe you? But if we don't test X, Y, Z that maybe has worked in America, we will never know whether it's doomed for failure in Japan, or maybe it also works, right? And another great example of this is social selling, specifically the in-platform conversion for retail or fashion industries, has been sky high in the Asian markets for, the better part of a decade, right? But it just started a few years ago in America and now starting to infiltrate here in Europe, right? So who's to say that something that is incredibly quickly picked up and adopted in one culture or one part of the world doesn't succeed somewhere else? Maybe it's time, maybe it's a cultural shift, maybe it's a generational shift, right? But if you don't test, you will never find out. And so to me, when it comes to international conversations, listen, don't always just, talk and give your knowledge to others, but also take in what others can give you from their own experiences.
As a two-way street. And I suppose what you talked about with the test and learn approach, this is a very important sort of feature in the marketing organization that you need to instill.
Yeah. Never stop learning, never stop testing. Even if it's just a minute little budget that you can spend on it, just keep challenging your preconceived notions, and something that didn't work 5 years ago might now actually be really successful.
Do you have any views on live commerce? Because that's something that it's one of those things that work very well in Asia. I lived in Hong Kong before I moved to Holland and saw it quite a lot. We've done some early testing here in Europe, and we see some brands being successful. Is that one of those things that you think is going to become big here too?
Personally, I haven't had a lot of experience with it myself, so I would really hesitate to give an opinion. In general, what I will say is that I think we are a bit lacking that maturity here in the European market when it comes to trusting that online world and the online purchasing. I find it much slower to mature than maybe the North American market or even, for example, Australia is. So I think it might, but not as fast as maybe we would expect it to be.
Yeah, I think there are still people who don't want to give their credit card details online because they're worried.
There's lots of people who still don't have a credit card.
Yeah. Well, that's actually in Holland, almost everyone. So we touched a bit upon e-commerce, and I think that might be a good bridge to move towards your role at Rad Power Bikes. And maybe you could also talk a bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so Rad Power Bikes is an e-bike company. I told you I was jumping around a lot of industries. So it's a North American e-bike company that has been really successful in America and Canada, and has been basically looking at moving into the European market, considering it's such a huge cycling environment. And e-bikes are definitely on the rise in Europe as well, not just traditional bicycles. So they stepped into the European market about 7 years ago, and I've been there for nearly 3 years. I started with Rad as a senior manager, marketing manager, and I've worked my way up into a director role, so a lot more working towards leading with the executive suite, right? So informing the executive suite and creating more strategic viewpoint. Originally, when I joined, I think the number one reason they chose me, which was very rewarding, is because they wanted to really strengthen their presence in Germany. And with my background and my experience, I could definitely give them some insights there and drive them to a better adoption rate in Germany. So it's a purely e-commerce platform. There's no retail stores. You can't go to like your local, sporting goods shop and just try out a bicycle. You buy it online, and it's kind of speaks to exactly what you were going back to. Like Europe is maybe lagging a bit behind of trusting buying something online, sight unseen, untouched, untested. Lots of people don't have a credit card or may not wish to spend quite that much money in one go online.
I would say that one of the main issues here is just that it's such a high price item.
Yeah. I will also add that this was all happening in the middle of the COVID pandemic, where supply chains were strained to the breaking point for everybody. It's not even isolated to our industry as bike manufacturers. So I think everybody has some experience somewhere of how badly availability has been impacted. But yeah, it's definitely been a period of time when a lot of challenges have come. So beyond the trust and the financial impact, you also had some bad news in the headlines, and people in general, I think, feeling a bit of the economic downturn, also specifically last year, because a lot of jobs were impacted, right? And spending in general was impacted. It does come back to very similarly to what you were mentioning about live commerce. I would even include social commerce still into that people don't buy a 2,000-3,000 euro bicycle from a social media advertisement, right? They might buy a 30 euro lipstick, or they might buy a 100 euro shoe, because the risk associated with that is much lower. When you're spending 2,000-3,000 euros, or some electric bicycles range easily into the 10,000 euro price point, you don't want to do that based on an Instagram post. It does not resonate with people. That's not their customer journey.
So if you look at other industries where there are similar challenges, I suppose one of the things that you see companies do is mitigation programs. So to mitigate some of this risk. And obviously, in a lot of industries, there's no questions asked, return policies and things of that nature. I would imagine in the biking industry, getting someone to come to your door to get a demonstration, if you want it, is another way to do the same thing.
So, yeah, I get what you're saying. And I know exactly which brand you're thinking of when you're bringing this example. But my answer to that would be, we as marketers, we can come up with a lot of solutions to perceived problems. But the most important part is to actually ask your customers or the consumers that haven't converted into customers and hear out what they actually believe is a problem or what is holding them back. We've done that specifically year after year as we have grown kind of the consumer funnel, right? The interested funnel. And then the conversion always takes a bit longer. So you want to make sure that you keep following up of what is the next generation of customers' concern. So we went actually from I want to try out this bicycle before I buy it, I want to make sure I have somewhere to take it for maintenance, right? What is the after sale experience for me? So it wasn't even just to bring the bike to me so I can test it out or give me an opportunity to go to a location to test it out. It was also okay, great. Now I have it. It's supposed to be an investment for the next 5 years or next 10 years, right? I mean, bicycles can live pretty long if you take good care of them. But how do I maintain it? How do I get spare parts? How do I get, warranty, insurance? I mean, the Netherlands, the theft capital of bicycles, right? And all of a sudden, a lot of companies were refusing to insure certain types of bicycles because the theft rate was just going through the roof. So you have to hear your customer, and then you have to find a solution that will ease that concern. Sometimes it's financial, right? I do not have 3,000 euros to spend in one go to buy a bicycle. Well, then maybe you need to partner up with a financial, provider that will provide a credit or split payments, right? I mean, there's lots of solutions. Yes, sometimes it is, I want to test it before I buy it, but that doesn't mean I have to bring the bicycle to you. Sometimes that means I need to be at local events and trade shows. Maybe I need to have a map of existing customers who are local to you, who are willing to let you ride their personal bicycle for an experience, right? And make it part of an advocacy group. It can be something as simple as I have a local repair shop in your city that also has an example model that you can go and test, right? So there's a lot of nuanced solutions to the problems that you hear from the customers in the end. And to us, those were the things that actually fixed all the problems. So it wasn't necessarily what's happening in the industry or what's happening to some of our competitors, but it's that direct connection to the customer and consumers to say, okay, you bought this bike. Now what, right? What is your concern? Or, hey, you haven't bought this bike yet. What's holding you back? And so having those questions answered helped us create our marketing roadmap and in many ways our business strategy as well, So, yeah.
I always say, and this is more for different types of industries, but I always say that, the best marketing person is probably the salesperson that's on the phone or that's meeting customers
or the
all day
customer
long
support agent. Yeah.
Yeah, because they hear all those objections and they hear the problems that people are having, and like your job as a marketer is kind of to ease those pain points so that people can flow through the funnel without
getting stuck. Yeah.
So I suppose that part was a bit missing at Rad Power Bikes because you don't have the salespeople, and you need to go and talk to those people in different ways.
Yeah. And in many ways, you can use your customer support data system. So if you have a ticketing system, right, there is a wealth of information in the ticketing system that is valuable to the marketers as well, whether that's for content creation, whether that's for advertising purposes, whether that's for locations you need to be present in. But again, it comes back to the data needs to be accurate, clean, or well-defined, and you need to be able to actually put it in a format that you can extract the insight from it. And that's not always the case.
No, but I suppose your role at Echo helped you do that a little bit more efficiently.
We definitely worked towards it, yeah. But I would say some systems are more conducive to it and than others. There are just like homegrown platforms that were never meant to be able to, get data extracted from. And so you have to kind of make it work in anecdotal forms, right? So you have to have people to translate the incoming call volumes and email volumes and just feed the data to marketing because there's no actual data to analyze except for what's in the head of the agent.
Sure. Yeah. I I think 15 years ago or something like this, when this was still a little bit in the beginning stages, I wanted to do exactly this. And I thought, okay, I have all these people calling in, but we're not really getting those insights because the agents are
busy solving the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. What I actually ended up doing is getting a transcribing software to transcribe all of those calls and then to run some analysis based on that. It was so early that what came out of it was not that useful. But nowadays, I think that's a very doable thing as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, what's next in terms of the strategy or marketing for Rad Power Bikes?
You mentioned Van Moof, so I'm going to be completely open and honest. What actually happened for us here in Europe is we shut down the sales side of our business. We have spare parts and customer support still fully functioning. We have a repair lineup of network for existing customers. So None of our customers were left hanging when we exited the market here in Europe. But the current marketing strategy is to refocus and double down in the North American market. So my peers in America are continuing their amazing work. But unfortunately, we here in the European side, we have been disbanded.
I see. Okay. Is the North American market, is that a much bigger market than Europe? Is it different?
It is very different. It is very different. Now, when we're talking about potential of, bike sales, I'm not really sure I would say it's a much bigger market. It is a very different market, right? The European market is a very mature cycling environment, right? Every single European market has some kind of a tradition around cycling. Some is more for sports, some is more for commuting, but definitely bicycles are part of our life since little childhood. In America, it is specifically America, but Canada is unfortunately fairly similar to that as well, is heavily reliant on cars for mobility.
Yeah.
Some bigger cities have good public transit, but only the big cities. Bicycles are used more for recreation there. Now that is changing. Specifically, the bigger cities are investing heavily into bike lanes and more commuting options.
San Francisco, Portland.
Oh my God, yes. Vancouver in Canada, Toronto, Quebec, Montreal, Boston, like you name it, right? So is there a growing market for bicycles? Absolutely, right? Huge potential to go after it. But it's also a huge market in general, right? So you also have to contend with a lot of competition that maybe here in Europe is easier to overcome because you don't have to sell people on the idea of cycling instead of driving. That already is pretty ingrained in us as European, residents. We use public transit, we cycle, we walk way more than we drive. But in America, you have that two-pronged approach where you have to bring people to the understanding that cycling is a really good alternative, and hope that obviously the city is putting the effort into building that safe environment for cycling as well. And then overcome kind of the conversation of like, okay, but which brand, which bicycle, how much money, can I afford it or do I need to put it on a credit card, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit of a longer conversion than maybe it would be here in Europe.
Right. So that sounds to me an argument for being in Europe as opposed to America. I think the funding or finance for a lot of these companies comes from the States. And so you need to show growth there in order to keep them happy. But in general, like you said, you don't have to educate people. I think whenever you have a brand or a product that you have the joint problems of both having to educate them about the use.
Yeah, the value of the product itself. Yeah,
the value of the product. And then why they should pick you is very often a little bit of a losing proposition because you're just going to end up spending. Yeah, it's very difficult. I do think that there's probably more competition here just because the market is so mature, but not just from bikes. There's also competition from public transport and regular bikes versus e-bikes. And
So I think specifically in this industry, I don't disagree with you, but what I would say is that this industry, because it has such an established field of competitors in Europe, and we have a much stronger system for regulating import and export, specifically from the Asian markets where maybe some products are not produced to the same quality. It is a tougher market to enter, right, for a new up-and-coming brand. Yes, there's a lot of established brands here in Europe already that are even locally made. America doesn't have that. Like nearly all brands for bicycles are fairly new brands for the North American market. But because of the looser regulations, a lot of the competition is swamping the market. So it's kind of flushing the market right now. We don't have that because we've been selling bicycles here in Europe for 100 and something years, right? So the entrance is much higher, much more difficult.
Thank you for listening or watching Memorable Marketing by MediaGroup. On this episode, we had Niki Harrold. I very much enjoyed our conversation. I hope you did too. For future episodes, feel free to subscribe and, of course, like the video. You can find our website for the agency at MediaGroupWW.com. Get in touch for any advice, strategy, marketing work. We'll be happy to help you.